From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network, this is a special Sunday presentation, Bloodbath in Charlottesville. As many people know from their internet viewing, newspaper reading, radio listening, and any way you can get the news about the bloodbath in Charlottesville, the march there by white supremacists, otherwise known as urban terrorists. 3 people killed, scores of people injured there in Charlottesville. But let's give you a little bit of a history of Charlottesville. Of course, it was home to a number of luminaries, as one would say. There, it used to be known as the city of Charlottesville, a C-ville. It has about 48,000 people, 50,000 people there. And it was home to a number of presidents, including Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe was there, and various others. He traveled to and from, was governor of Virginia. While both served as governor of Virginia, they lived in Charlottesville and traveled to and from Richmond. That's 114 kilometers, or 71 miles there. So that was it, and the northeast of the city was the hometown. This is James Madison, Orange Niche Road, Orange. I don't know what that was, but anyway, that's where Madison was, James Madison, that is. And the University of Virginia, which is in Charlottesville, every Friday night we have the Friday Jobber, and we get reports from the University of Virginia. As Larry Sabato's shop, the Crystal Ball. The Crystal Ball was no doubt dark on Saturday. And it was, of course, founded by Thomas Jefferson there. Monticello is 3 miles southeast of the city, and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site there in the Charlottesville area. So those are some of the things going on around there during the Revolutionary War. The Convention Army was imprisoned in Charlottesville there. So it has a long history. During the Civil War, they avoided carnage there. None other than George Armstrong Custer came by and engaged the local guard. It was a Confederate guard. The mayor of the city surrendered to Custer's men to keep the town from being burned. So the Charlottesville factory, founded in 1820 to 1830, was accidentally bludgeoned during General Custer's 1865 raid through the Shenandoah Valley. Now, it is right at the Shenandoah Valley. That is mountainous range in Virginia, a different part of Virginia as you leave northern Virginia and move down to that area. A current predominantly African-American church was traces its lineage to the First Church. This is in Charlottesville, established in 1864. Previously, it was illegal for African-Americans to have their own churches, although they could worship at that time, in white churches. Congregational, we'll get right in a minute. Beth Israel building there in 1882 is the oldest synagogue building standing in Virginia. So that's back to 1882. Charlottesville in 1958 closed its segregated white schools as part of Virginia's strategy of mass resistance. Now, the march Friday night with the candlelight and what have you did not happen in a vacuum, period. This was a strategy by the Confederates in Virginia to federal court orders and decision Brown versus Topeka. Closures were required, a series of state laws collectively known as the Stanley Plan. African-American schools remained open. So some of the things there, some of the history of Charlottesville, the University of Virginia, as you know, the Crystal Ball, it's Dr. Larry Sabato. He made a statement yesterday. He'd been there almost 50 years, and he'd never seen any shameful event like the one occurred there on Saturday. But at the same time, we have to look at the types of politics in the area and the right of center of politics there of Sabato and some other people. He's headed the Political Science Association. I'm not sure if he's the president of it now, but he had written books on John F. Kennedy, etc. So that is the story of Charlottesville. And let's go to the local paper. It's owned by Berkshire Hathaway. That's Warren Buffett's shop. It's 125 years old, called the Daily Progress. And the big headline is that white nationalist rally turns fatal. Ohio man charged with a second-degree murder. There, Mr. James Alex Fields Jr., 20 years old. It started with singing, praying, and slogans and chanting and flag waving turned violent. This is the story here. Death of one protester, 2 members of the Virginia State Police. Alt-right marchers, counter demonstrators, beat each other with sticks, fists, and sprayed each other with pepper spray. It was the Friday alt-right march. Now, the 32-year-old woman was killed there, and 19 other people were injured, according to the release here, when a crowd is driven by Fields sped into the counter-protesters. Evidently, they said it was premeditated, as according to the police there in Charlottesville. At 4th Street Northeast and Walter Street, mid-afternoon there, we'll have some audio for you, video anyway, nonetheless, of the car crash. The crash occurred after the rally was broken up, and large numbers of protesters were marching down Walter Street. A Dodge Challenge, this is driven by Fields, slammed into protesters into the rear of another car. The Dodge backed up quickly and sped away, despite heavy frontal damage to it. The driver of Marmy, Ohio, this is Fields 20, was arrested and charged with 1 count of second-degree murder. There'll be more counts there. And the FBI civil rights investigation had been opened. 2 hours after the car crash, 2 state troopers were killed when their police helicopter crashed and burned near Old Farm Road. The copter was involved in providing surveillance information during the day. Shortly before 5 p.m., the Virginia State Police copter crashed in the woods near the place there, killing 2 state police troopers. Several dozen people attended a small vigil that is at McGuffey Park. That was on Saturday evening in memorial of woman. In memory, the woman who was killed during the car wreckage. Flowers were brought there. Candles were later placed around the flowers. The Unite the Right rally was scheduled to start at noon, but never happened. By 11:30, counter-demonstrations were going at it. No doubt there was a comment from some of the ministers that the anti-fascist demonstrators saved them. Professor Cornel West said that. So basically what we're starting to see is a reevaluation of how progressive / the left anti-fascist demonstrators handle these encounters with alt-right. And in between alt-right or with alt-right was a group of militia types armed to the teeth. They had bulletproof clothing, assault rifles, etc. One right-wing group in militia garb carrying rifles, this is from the paper there, stood between the pro-white demonstrators and counter-demonstrators as more marchers arrived, flying a variety of flags, including the Confederate flag, battle flag, More counter demonstrators also arrived, and on with the day, pepper spray was there. Alt-right demonstrators splashed nearby reporters with ash mixed with liquid, while other reporters were pelted with eggs by the protesters. One African-American reporter was punched by some racists wearing a T-shirt with a portrait of Adolf Hitler. Protesters pelleted the alt-right's marchers trying to enter the park with balloons filled with paint. Both sides hurled water bottles, some with urine inside, others makeshift missiles at there, others threw road flares, other items across Market Street. So in other words, it was a free-for-all. After declaring the assembly illegal, the Virginia National Guard took over the perimeter locations to allow city police to join with state police in clearing the park. Clashes between the groups continued on the downtown mall. The police protection there was wholly inadequate, no doubt about that. According to the organizer, this is a momentous event for our movement, with Jason Kirschler said as he joined demonstrators in leaving downtown. They had to do whatever they had to do legally, legal to shut us down. This is not over, he claimed, as he, as they say, got his ass out of there. And another alt-right torchbearer, Richard Spencer, said he was outraged by what he said was a lack of police protection. Well, he had the militias there. What more does he want? After speaking at McGiffey Park, the vice chair of the youth and college division NAACP for Virginia, who came to Charlottesville from Richmond, for the rally's minor stories, his grandfather told them. Okay. In fact, I can look at what's going on and see why my grandfather was talking about it. It is not scary, but it is appalling, and no doubt about that. Very appalling there. The Bob McAdams, he's president of the Charlottesville Center for Peace and Justice, said the service offered by local churches on Saturday and sanctuary they provided at Justice and McGinty Parks during the rally were blessings. Well, hopefully they had security there. William Ritchie, who is involved in several restaurants, said the July 8 KKK rally and Saturdays had hurt downtown businesses, no doubt about it. When they're down there, everyone else is not down there. And they basically go on to talk about Charlotte Police Chief Al Thomas has been empowered to regulate, restrict, and prohibit any assemblies of persons or movements of persons or vehicles on any public property, including parks, streets, and sidewalks. That's according to a release from city officials. I suppose the emergency ordinance that was at 8 last night. So that's from Charlottesville on to the Washington Post. Basically the same thing. KKK members, 19 people were injured. And there, the governor, McAuliffe, declared a state of emergency. It was late, said an evening news conference that he had a message for all white supremacists and Nazis who came into Charlottesville today. Go home. You're not wanted in this Commonwealth. Maurice Jones, the Charlottesville city manager, looked stricken as he spoke. Hate came to our community today in a way that we had feared, but we never really let ourselves imagine would, he said. State and local authorities declined to take reporters' questions, no doubt about it. And you'll see from the melee, various melees there, video recordings, a car crashing there. That was a 2010 Dodge Charger. It accelerated into the crowd, hit another car. there. The street was filled with people opposed to the white nationalists who came to town with the Confederate flags, anti-Semitic epithets. I was watching a YouTube presentation. They had some footage there, in fact, where we got some of our stuff, and that was part of the alt-right thing. I could see from the commentary there, and whomever it was, DJ Trump came on TV with a very, very weak statement, blaming all sides, and that will not do. Fields, he said, Fields' father was killed by a drunken driver. I guess Fields decided he would, a few months before his birth, as according to an uncle who spoke on a condition of anonymity. His father left him money that the uncle kept in a trust until Fields reached adulthood. When he turned 18, he demanded his money, and that was the last I had any contact with him. Fields, he said, grew up mostly in northern Kentucky, where he was raised by a single mother who was a paraplegic. The uncle saw Fields mostly at family gatherings, described his nephew as not really friendly and mostly subdued. In other words, a troubled young man, I suppose. Early police evacuated, go over that. In a statement in the afternoon, that it was from Jersey, doing a Veterans Help conference there. And this is the problem that DJ Trump has. He just said that without specifically mentioning the white nationalists or the supremacists or their views, I would recommend you take a good look at the mirror and remember, this is David Duke. Sorry about that. We condemn in the strongest possible terms, DJ Trump, this egregious display of hate, bigotry, and violence on many sides and on many sides. From David Duke, he's a Trump supporter. Incidentally, this Fields was a registered Republican, also a Trump supporter. That tells you where it was. I would recommend you take a good look in the mirror. And remember, it was white America who put you in the presidency, not the radical left, he wrote. And a reporter asked in Jersey whether he wanted to support a white nationalist, dozens of whom wore red Make America Great Again hats during the riots there in Charlottesville. DJ Trump did not respond. As the crowd began to thin in the afternoon, the town remained unsettled, no doubt about that. Various people here, Chan Williams, 22, a counter demonstrated in the street, chanting Black Lives Matter, and whose streets, our streets, that you heard that, you hear it in the audio we took also. There, it was over the removal of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The city of Charlottesville voted to remove the statue earlier this year, but it remains in Emancipation Park, formerly known as Lee Park, pending a judge later this month ruling. That was a judge's ruling, unfortunately, that allowed this rally to take place. Counter demonstrations held, Black Lives Matter placards, support for equality and love, as rally goers waved Confederate flags, posters that said, Gummy, referring to non-Jewish people, and the Jewish media is going down. No Trump, no KKK, no fascism was the counter chant that went on and on and on. Now let me go over here. People in Charlottesville criticized the slow response to the violent demonstrations. This was police came under criticism for failing to keep people apart. They didn't have enough police there, no doubt about that. The worst thing is that people got hurt and the police stood by and didn't do a damn thing about it, and I cleaned that up a little bit. And in our video presentation there are some words there, but the words equal the day. The loss of the police officers only compound the calamity of the day, that pushed police, city officials, and residents to limit cable stations replayed on a loop-a-loop, as they call the violence at Emancipation Park. The police appeared to retreat, then watched the beatings before evidently moving in to end the freefall, made arrests, and tended to the injured. The governor declared, of course, a state of emergency and activated the Virginia National Guard. And they finally got there from Charles Ramsey. If you recall, he used to be the chief in the District of Columbia and also in Philadelphia, an African-American. The whole point is overwhelming force so that people don't get the idea they do things and get away with it. Well, they had that idea. Demonstrating counter-demonstrations need to be in sight and sound of each other, but somebody needs to be between them. Well, they let these militias be between them, and that was an unfortunate, complicating the dynamic. This is from the Washington Post, that several dozen groups of armed militiamen in camouflage, toting assault-style weapons, were in the middle of the crowd. Some claimed they were there to keep the peace. They were liars. Cornel West, we talked about him earlier, who attended a church service there in Charlottesville with a large number of clergy, which were totally ineffective. The police didn't do anything in terms of protecting the people of the community. The clergy, West said, if it hadn't been for the anti-fascists protecting us from the neo-fascists, we would have been crushed like cockroaches, no doubt about that. Richard Spencer, he is a white nationalist, one of the leaders, said the police failed to protect him too. I don't know where he was. He had the militias there. From Hatter, this is Joseph Hatter, he's a commander with the Charlottesville police, said officers tried to create separate areas for protest and counter-protests to reduce violence, but he conceded it didn't work. It didn't. I think there was a plan to have them separate. They didn't want to be separated. This was him. They just didn't have enough. Police said the National Guard should have been called in there after Friday night. That was what the problem was in the first instance. Now, this is an editorial from the Washington Post. What a presidential president would have said in Charlottesville. Here's what D.J. Trump said about the violence there. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the egregious. We read this before. I won't read it again from many sides. Here's what a presidential president would have said. The violence Friday and Saturday in Charlottesville, Virginia, is a tragedy and unacceptable, impermissible assault on American values. It is an assault specifically on the ideas that we cherish most in a pluralistic society: tolerance, peace, and coexistence, and diversity. Well, he can't say that because this particular president, D.J. Trump, has the alt-right Steve Bannon is his senior advisor. That tells you lots about what is going on here and how this plays out and the need for new strategies and tactics. The event was triggered by individuals who embraced hate, racist, neo-Nazis, KKK members, and their sympathizers. These are extremists who fomented the violence in Charlottesville and whose views all Americans must condemn and reject. Well, all Americans don't condemn and reject it. To wink at racism or to condone it through silence or false moral equivalency or evasion, as some do, is no better, no more acceptable than the racism itself. Just as we can justly identify radical Islamic terrorists when we see it and call it out, we can see the racists in Charlottesville and understand that they are an ephemeron in our society, which depends so centrally on mutual respect. Well, there's none there. That's been gone a long time ago. But you have to say that before D.J. Trump's administration came in, the Republican Party had followed this course and cultivated these so-called radical groups, white supremacist groups, through the militias. Remember when they were running willy-nilly across places like Michigan, setting up the objective reality that the Republicans now control Michigan. Michigan is now a right-to-work state. So these kinds of things do not happen in a vacuum. They happen when people let them happen. Under whatever labels and using whatever code words, heritage, tradition, nationalism, the idea that whites or other ethnic, national, or racial groups is superior to another is not acceptable. Americans should not excuse, and I, as president, will not countenance fringe elements in this society who peddle such anti-American ideas. While they have deep and nauseous roots in our history, they must not be given any quarter nor any license today. Nor will we accept acts of domestic terrorism perpetrated by such elements, as it appears to be the case. The vehicle that plowed into the counter-demonstrators on Saturday in Charlottesville did so intentionally. The driver should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He will be. The American system of justice will treat terrorists who are Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, or anything else as it treats terrorists who are Muslims, just as it treated those who perpetuated the Boston Marathon bombing in 2003. We may all have pressing and legitimate questions about how the violence in Charlottesville unfolded, whether it could be prevented. There will be time in the coming days, no doubt about that. This story will be very big later today on the talk shows, and stand ready to provide any and all. This would be from a president. Resources, the federal government, the FBI is finally opening an investigation there to a civil rights investigation. But one has to understand that the civil rights statutes themselves are very weak. So since you have very weak civil rights statutes, it's very, very difficult to do. Some programming notes here. Numbers Man is out from WBRN Radio. You can pick it up on many of the outlets. That's the macroeconomic program that we have weekly. We'll come with an open source report in the next day or two. We also have the Justine Damon Memorial Service, an edited version of it. It will come out later today on some of these channels, and it will appear on others as we get them up, as we change some things around. Now, our YouTube channels, we are reorganizing those, so stay tuned there. The WBRN radio channel will be there, and WBRN channel 2 will also be there because of the way that YouTube handles some of our broadcasts. The open source report is now on iHeart Radio, so go to iHeart Radio and open source report. You plug it in and you will find it there under the podcast. It used to be on the shows, but anyway, it is there, as with Boston Red and Numbers Man. Those will be there. Boston Red is now more synonymous with the Boston Red Network. Originally, we started out with just Boston Red. We're on Monday morning. We had the Monday morning quarterback as usual, as the baseball season moves on through the month of August. And before we forget, we'll need to do the sports here. We almost slipped on it. The NFL exhibition season is out there. There were some games played here. And there's also the boycott called by Spike Lee. They will come up, I believe it's on the 23rd, in front of the NFL headquarters in New York. Let me just make sure. Brian Harper went down, slipped an extension there. In the exhibition game here, Marshawn Lynch, Oakland Raider, remains seating during the national anthem. This sort of thing is coming up continuously. We have these demonstrations out here. And, of course, the boycott is about teams refusing to hire Colin Kaepernick. No doubt a Harper injury could be a problem for the Nationals, who are trying to go into the playoffs. So we'll see how that materializes. This is one of the problems with sporting teams, particularly as sporting teams move along. We have problems. Let's go to Marcel Lynch, and where? Oh, whoops! Got the wrong thing here. Want to get the scores, and we got the schedules, and we don't want to. This is Major League Baseball from Saturday. Coming up here.
Practice football, Raiders and Cardinals. Marshawn Lynch not playing in the game.
This is Marshall. He's running back with the Oakland Raiders. Remain seated during the national anthem in 20-10 loss to the Arizona Cardinals. But again, he was not playing there, so he's sitting on the bench. The coach, Jack Del Rio, said he spoke with Lynch after the game and was not aware that he planned to set. Well, he did plan to set, so there you go. The quarterback said the team supports Lynch. This is E.J. Manuel, adding the decision more of a personal thing from him. Lynch was not in the NFL during Colin Kaepernick's knee protest against racism and brutality last season. So there you go, Marcel Lynch, one of the players that has come up there. You're going to have this as you go through these games. Nonetheless, the Pirates were in Toronto. Blue Jays are 7-2. The Red Sox were in New York, 10-5 over the Yankees. Sox have moved ahead there. The Twins and Tigers in the Motor City. Tigers 12-11 in a slugfest. Twins had 19 hits, no errors, and the Tigers 13 hits and 1 error. Cleveland and the Rays in Florida. The Rays were shut out by Cleveland 3-0. The Giants and Nationals in D.C. They'll have a lot of makeup games. This game was delayed by a rain. This is the one that the player extended his knee or whatever happened with him. The Nationals 3-1 in that game. The Mets and Phillies in Philadelphia. Phillies 3-1 over the hapless Mets. The Royals in Chicago. Royals 5-4 over the White Sox, and in 10 the Reds and Brewers in Milwaukee. Brewers pulled us out 6-5. The Rockies and Marlins in Florida. Marlins 4-3. Atlanta and the Cardinals in St. Louis. Atlanta 6-5 over. The Cardinals 6-5 over Atlanta. The Cardinals had 11 hits, 1 error, and Atlanta 9 hits, 1 error. The Astros and Rangers. Astros have been losing a lot of games lately. 8-3 was the final score in Dallas. Rangers over the Astros. The Cubs and D-backs out in Arizona. D-backs was all D-backs here. 6-2. D-backs had 12 hits, 2 errors, and the Cubs 9 hits and 1 error. The Orioles and Athletics in Oakland. Orioles 12-5. The Angels and Mariners in Seattle. Angels 6-3. Going too fast here. The Padres and Dodgers in Los Angeles. LA 6-3 in that contest. Mr. Wilson was the winner there. Okay. Let me just quickly do the standings. We usually do this on the Monday morning quarterback, but we shall do it here. Incidentally, of this broadcast, there will be a longer version and a shorter version out there. In the American League East, the Red Sox are on top. The Yankees are 4.5 games back. The Tigers are 8 games back, and the Orioles 8.5 games back. So you have some of the playoff thing coming here. Wild card, I should say. Cleveland is on top in the Central, and this is American League Central. The Twins 4.5 games back. The Royals are 5 games back between the Royals and Twins, to see how this thing plays out. In the West, Houston is still on top. The Angels are 12 games back, and the Seattle Mariners are 13 games back. So we have some sort of wild card thing going on here. In the National League East, the Nationals are on top, and the Marlins are the nearest thing, but they're 14.5 back in the National League East. The Cubs are on top in the Central, and then comes the Cards, and they're all bunched up together. Anyone could have this, and the Brewers are 2 games back. The Pirates, Pittsburgh, are 3 games back. And finally, in the National League West, the Dodgers are on top, and then comes the Rockies, 17 games back. The D-backs are 17 games back, and you can forget about it. Padres are 31 games back, and the poor Giants of San Francisco are 36.5 games back. So that is the standings. This will do it to us. We have an audio presentation here that we will now go to, and we'll see you on the Monday morning quarterback. And also later today we'll have the Christine DeMond Memorial Service there, and we'll also be saying goodbye to the guitarist, country and western singer Glenn Campbell, who died at 81 years old.
Event on Veterans Affairs and some legislation and a bill he's planning to sign here any moment. Let's bring in our panel while we wait for the president's remarks. CNN law enforcement analyst Cedric Alexander is with us. CNN senior media correspondent Brian Stelter is here, and CNN contributor and former president and CEO of the NAACP, Cornell Brooks. Cornell, I'll start with you. I just read the president's words urging unity. Your reaction?
Well, we appreciate the president's words urging unity, but we need a unity of will in our opposition to white nationalism and white supremacy. The words thus far do not explicitly address the hate in our midst that has been exacerbated and intensified by this president's actions and inactions, beginning on the campaign trail many months ago. When we have a president who can engage in nuclear trash talk with respect to Pyongyang, but cannot explicitly condemn the mushroom cloud of white nationalism hanging over Charlottesville, it is a shame. It is abominable. It is reprehensible. We need the president to act as not only commander-in-chief, but moral tone-setter-in-chief, and to speak to the hate, the bigotry, the bias, the anti-Semitism, the xenophobia in our midst that is violent. Where we have a crowd assault by car, apparently, if this happened in Paris or London or Madrid, we might call it an act of terrorism. We need the president to step up. This is a moral moment. It calls upon him to act in accord with the gravity and the gravitas of his office. And that means he has to be very clear, very explicit, that we cannot tolerate this kind of violence. We cannot tolerate this kind of hate speech and hate crimes occurring in our midst, and certainly not in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Let me read what the president tweeted once again, because he does condemn hate. He says, we all must be united and condemn all that hate stands for. There is no place for this kind of violence in America. Let's come together as one. He also sent a follow-up tweet that was less specific to this incident, but he does mention Charlottesville, saying, I'm in Bedminster for meeting and press conference on VA and all that we have done and are doing to make it better, but Charlottesville sad. Cedric Alexander, to you, you have said that tweet, the first one and the second, aren't enough. What do you want to hear specifically from the president in his upcoming remarks?
Well, I think what this country needs to hear as a whole and around the globe, we need to hear the president say to this country in this very moment, he needs to speak specifically to the groups that are out there that has created this violence. And those white supremacist groups, he needs to make sure he tell the American people and the world he is separating himself from anything that is anti-American, if you will, and their acts are anti-American, quite frankly. And what we have to have at this very moment, Anna, is a president who stands up and not just say we need to come together as a nation, but need to demonstrate it now through action going forward. And as you heard Mr. Brooks say, this just did not start today. A lot of the messaging that came out of his campaign very early on, in many ways, many people will conclude or believe it set the stage. Now, whether that's true or not, here's the important piece. The President of the United States himself has to separate himself from anything that associates itself with violence, because we're in a place in this country right now, at this very moment, where all people, black, white, Jewish, Christian, everyone, we have to stand together as a nation. We may be up on a nuclear war here any day, any moment. We don't know. But what we're seeing today in no kind of way suggests to the rest of the world that we are standing together as the United States of America. So here's what I will say to those groups that are out there who perpetuates racism and sexism and and who are anti-Semitic. There is no place in our nation for this. This nation is going to move forward, and we have to move forward together. But everyone wants a piece of the American pie, and we all have a responsibility to each other as Americans to be respectful of each other, to hear each other's differences, and to find resolve. And that is not going to be done through violence, because our children are watching. Absolutely. And not only are our children watching, but the world is watching us today. And this is very shameful. I'm embarrassed by it, but hopefully the President of the United States here momentarily will speak very specifically to these groups that are perpetuating this violence, which started last night and before, and put an end to it and separate himself from David Duke and anyone associated with this type of
Brian,
violence.
do you anticipate what the president says having an impact on these white nationalist
I think
people?
that's the most important point. Exactly what you're describing. This is not over in Charlottesville. This is ongoing. The protests are ongoing. At the moment, the white nationalists are off on their side and others are off on their. There's not clashes that we're showing live right now, but this is ongoing. It's going to get dark tonight. Folks are going to drink. They're going to go out, and they're probably going to continue this kind of chaotic behavior. The president has an opportunity here to be a calming influence.
Right.
And I'm sure the Virginia governor and the Charlottesville mayor would greatly appreciate the president showing that kind of leadership in this moment, as you do still have hundreds of folks that came into town to protest, and then hundreds of counter-protesters who have come to Charlottesville as well. This stage was set a while ago. We kind of knew this was coming today. There was a hope that there wouldn't be violence the way there has been. I think that for a lot of Americans who watch the video of that attack with the vehicle, it's a vehicular attack.
Which, by the way, these are some live images right now from the scene. This is the aftermath.
Yeah, these are the other cars that were there that got rammed when this car came in a very fast rate of speed down this pedestrian area. A lot of Americans are going to watch that video of those protesters having their bodies curled into the air, and they're going to say that looks like domestic terrorism. Whether we call it that, whether the president calls it that, a lot of Americans are going to watch that video and they're going to be reminded of Nice, where there was a terrorist attack with a car last year. They're going to be reminded of London, where a car was used on London Bridge in order to mow down people there.
Let me get
That's what they're going to think of, whether it's called that or not.
Cedric, because of your law enforcement experience, what would you call this?
Well, that was a very deliberate act from what we're seeing in this video. We saw a car, late model sedan, plow into a crowd of people and left the scene. There's video footage of that person backing away, leaving the scene. That is purpose. That was done on purpose.
I don't think we know yet who the victims are.
We don't know who the victims are.
I think we can confidently say that these were counter-protesters who were hit by the vehicle. The reason I say that is we see the slogans on their posters, we see the signs they were carrying. This was an anti-white nationalist march. Some of these were Democratic Socialists of America members, other liberal groups that were leftist groups that were protesting. They were walking through the downtown mall area, which is a pedestrian plaza, when this car came speeding up. Now, we don't know who was in the car. We don't know what the motive was. There's always an outside chance, right, that this could be someone that had a problem, a heart condition, and suddenly they lost control of their car.
Well, that's
not what the protesters think happened.
Yeah, that's not going to be the case. This was very deliberate. But let me say this, is that this must stop. It must come to an end right now at this very moment in Charlottesville, as anybody out there is listening, because what we are seeing taking place.
And to find out more, we can now cross live to RT America's Alex Rubenstein, who's there on the ground for us. Hi there, Alex. So what is the level of clashes right now, and how much is the police involved?
Well, most of the clashes have just ended. There were about 4 major brawls between the Unite the Right protesters and various Antifa groups and Black Lives Matter groups. There were a lot of people. I saw a lot of people covered in blood, big welts on their head, a lot of pepper spray, people using pepper spray, not the police, a lot of chemical dispersals, people throwing watercolors, any kind of thing to mess with the other side.
Were local authorities prepared for such a large influx of right-wing movements, you think? How are the locals reacting?
Well, so the locals are very negative to it. This is a college town in Virginia, and it's considered a very liberal town for Virginia. So they're not very pleased with it, from what I've gathered. My hotel concierge actually took the day off today to protest, he told me. The police have been pretty well prepared, I think. They were mostly hands-off last night. That was kind of dangerous. Today they were much more hands-on. A state of emergency was declared about 10 minutes ago.
Well, could you tell us more about the background of this story? Why are they protesting and why are they clashing with one another? Give us some context, please.
Sure. Well, I mean, since the election of Donald Trump, there's been a proliferation of alt-right rallies, so to speak. Unite the Right is the big hashtag campaign that they're going with. They're touring the country right now to do these. Berkeley's one place, and I'm sure Antifa is all over the country and protesting them wherever they are.
But why is this particular small city so important to them?
Yeah, so the city voted to remove a statue of the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. There was a Klan rally here actually a little over a month ago that I attended, and they were also protesting the removal of the statue. This is the same thing that the various alt-right groups are doing here today under the Unite the Right hashtag and campaign.
Well, thanks for that update. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you if more clashes do break out between the two opposing sides. Thanks for that update. That was Alex Rubenstein.
So, again, I want to thank everybody for being here. In particular, I want to thank our incredible veterans, and thank you, fellas. Let me shake your hand.
Real quick, we're covering this because the president's going to speak on Charlottesville. I'm going to mute my mic for a second. As soon as the president speaks on Charlottesville, we'll go back to covering what's going on in Charlottesville. And if you want to watch the rest of the event and what the rest of what the president has to say on the Veterans Administration, then you can go to our other stream of this on Right Side Broadcasting. We're just going to show the part of the president's speech where he talks about Charlottesville coming up.
They're great people. But we're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. This has been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play or be with their parents and have a good time. I just got off the phone with the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, and we agreed that the hate and the division must stop, and must stop right now. We have to come together as Americans with love for our nation and true affection, really, and I say this so strongly, true affection for each other. Our country is doing very well in so many ways. We have record, just creed, religion, or political party. We are all Americans first. We love our country. We love our God. We love our flag. We're proud of our country. We're proud of who we are. So we want to get the situation straightened out in Charlottesville, and we want to study it. And we want to see what we're doing wrong as a country where things like this can happen. My administration is restoring the sacred bonds of loyalty between this nation and its citizens. But our citizens must also restore the bonds of trust and loyalty between one another. We must love each other, respect each other, and cherish our history and our future together. So important. We have to respect each other. Ideally, we have to love each other. And now to the Veterans Administration, where I'm so proud of David Shulkin and...
Folks, somebody might... Holy shit! Fuck you! Come on, man! Holy shit! The car just drove into people. Somebody is really badly injured on the ground. Fuck you! And then the car smashed into other cars and then backed out of there. It was completely tinted up. Completely tinted up. Oh my God. Oh my God. So... somebody knew the march was coming, and before the march could get underway of resistance of Antifa and anti-racist, some racist dicks smashed into people. Holy shit. He rammed into the back of a line of cars. People were pinned in between cars. People on the ground, blood on the ground. Chaotic. And then the car reversed and sped out of here. Completely tinted windows. You could not see who was in it. The cops just now getting here. Where the fuck were you? People over. We got it on camera. It was like a gray Mustang, possibly all tinted out windows. Holy shit. Please, people, call 911. We need multiple ambulances. I don't know. What street is this? They already called. Okay. Okay, a lot of people have already called medics. Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for anybody home that was calling 911 when you saw that whole